At my son's wedding, they sat me by the kitchen door, out of sight, out of mind, and by the time the band hit their third song, I had already decided who would leave that night with a new last name and who would leave with nothing at all. You want the short version? When the bride's mother lifted her champagne glass and toasted to family, I was on the phone with my lawyer activating documents nobody in that ballroom knew existed. Before the cake was cut, I took back the deeds to the house and the cars. If you're watching this on a screen somewhere, follow my story to the end and tell me the city you're in. I want to see how far the truth travels. My name is Lydia Hale. I am 69 years old, a grandmother of 3, a retired bookkeeper with a spine people mistake for kindness. I don't do scenes. I do signatures. That was my husband's joke, may God rest him. He was a mason who built with stone. I built with paper. I kept the binders that kept the roof over our heads. When he died, those binders became my anchor. They became something else, too, on the day my son Daniel married a girl who thought I looked better behind a swinging door. The dress I wore was dove gray, the sort that schemes rather than clings. I'd chosen it because it matched my hair and the pearls I still reach for when I want to remember my husband's hands at the back of my neck. The ceremony had been lovely. I cried at the vows like any mother would. I thought the worst I would have to survive that day was the ache of handing my boy to his new life and the sweetness of gaining a daughter. But the reception told the truth. The check-in table was draped in linen the color of heavy cream. The girl with the headset and clipboard glanced at me with the polite smile you give someone's aunt and handed me a card with my name and table number. I didn't look until I'd pinned it on. Table 13. Kitchen door. If you've never been seated there, let me paint it for you. It's where the trays come out wheezing with steam and the door swings back with a silver edge that thumps the wall to a count you start to hate. The air smells like garlic and heat. There's always a cart with a loose wheel, a stack of used plates no one knows where to put, and the sort of chair that collapses a little when you sit. Mrs. Hale, a young man in black sleeves rolled to the elbow, hovered by my elbow, fidgety. We've had some. The bride was very specific about the room's look. We're trying to keep the color palette consistent for photographs. My dress is gray, I said. He swallowed. It's, old photographs versus modern. She sent mood boards. A mood board, I thought. For a mother. Laughter burst from the ballroom, bright and warm. Through the swinging door, I caught the glitter of a chandelier, the white arc of the dance floor, Daniel's profile as he shook someone's hand. The door hit the wall again and the boy flinched, cheeks pink. Your dinner will be right out, ma'am. I sat. I have been a woman long enough to know when to stay still and let silence do the work. 2 bridesmaids swanned through the door to check their lipstick, saw me, startled, and lowered their voices the way people do when they're near a fire they didn't start. Somewhere inside, the DJ announced the wedding party. Names rolled like drums. There was a speech by the bride's father about opening hearts and homes. There was applause. There was the scrape of my chair on scuffed tile as I stood because my legs had begun to shake, not from age, from fury. You want to know what breaks you? It isn't the insult. It's the proof that it was never an accident. I had paid for every flower in that hall. I had wired deposits to the estate, the florist, the string quartet, the photographer whose work the bride's mother called chic without being common. I sent them quietly at night when the house was asleep because Daniel said it would be easier if the bride's family could pretend they were hosting. I did it to make peace and I did it because I could. The house they lived in? I bought it when the market dipped and held the deed in my LLC while they saved. The SUV she drives? Title in my name, insurance on my monthly draft. The sedan for Daniel's commute? Also mine. I was waiting for the day they'd prove they could take over the notes. I thought love was time plus generosity. I learned it is also boundaries. The kitchen manager brought me chicken, pale and sweating under gravy, and asked if everything was all right. That question has floated on the surface of my life more times than I can count. I looked at him and thought of my husband in our first apartment, chalk dust in his hair, coming home from laying block in the cold and laughing when I showed him the green ledger where I'd written out our plan. We'll get there, Lydia, he said. Brick by brick. I need a quiet place to make a phone call, I told the manager. Of course, he said, too fast. He led me to a hallway where the music dimmed and the carpet hushed my shoes. I didn't bother to look at the photos of couples who had danced this floor before. I leaned against cool plaster and pulled out my phone. When my lawyer answered on the second ring, I said only this: "Kara has placed me by the kitchen door." "Understood," Ruth said. She is a woman with a voice like fresh paper. "Do you want me to proceed with what we discussed, or do you want to wait until the weekend?" "Proceed," I said, and the word left my mouth like a stone that had waited years for the right hand to throw it. We had not planned revenge. We had planned prudence. Months earlier, while vendors were being booked and cake flavors were being argued about on speakerphone, I'd sat in Ruth's office and laid out the binders. Titles, bills of sale, closing papers, escrow releases and signed by design, rental agreements with a month-to-month clause and an option for my LLC to reclaim possession with 30 days' notice. Vehicle titles where I was the registered owner and Daniel the primary driver. A gift letter I never sent. "I'm not trying to hurt them," I'd told Ruth. "I am trying to protect what my husband and I built. I'll transfer titles when I feel comfortable. I don't feel comfortable with the bride's mother treating me like a donor from a brochure." Ruth had nodded, tapping the corner of a paper box with her pen. "You don't need a reason to retain ownership of your own property. But if you want one on file, we'll use language about safety, risk, and clear boundaries." I signed, not in anger, not in fear, but with the steadiness of a woman who understands that promises without paper are wishes. Now, in that hallway while the world toasted the couple, Ruth's keyboard clicked. "All right," she said. "The revocation of the permission to occupy is drafted. The notice will be couriered to their address by morning. The 2 vehicle titles are already in your safe deposit box. I'll email the towing company you selected in case you choose to pick up the SUV and the sedan tonight. You have keys to both." "I do," I said. "And spare fobs. Would you like me to alert the property manager to change the locks tomorrow?" "Tonight," I said. "Before midnight." "Understood." I ended the call and watched the carpet until the pattern stopped shimmering. When I walked back toward the kitchen, the door thumped the wall again and the scent of buttercream rolled out like fog. I was not sad. I was not even angry in the way that makes your chest heave. I was clear. At table 13, my chair had swallowed the shape of me. A busboy had set a tiny saucer of rolls in front of my plate. I tucked my napkin into my purse, stood, and walked into the ballroom. You cannot imagine how bright a room becomes when you decide to stop trying to be invisible. The chandeliers above me burned. The music spun. My son stood talking to his new mother-in-law, a woman with a dress so fitted it moved like a curtain in a windless room. When she turned and saw me, her smile did not reach her eyes. "Lydia," she chirped, "we didn't see you at the table for family." "I wouldn't have fit the color palette," I said. She tilted her head. "Well, you know how these things are." "I do," I said. "I know exactly how these things are." I did not fight. I did not make a speech. I walked to my son and kissed his cheek. I told him I loved him and that my feet were tired. He squeezed my hand, distracted, already nodding at someone behind me. That is a feeling it takes a lifetime to learn how to recognize, the squeeze of affection that is already halfway gone. I let his hand go. Then I left. Outside, the October air cut clean. I stood beneath a row of sycamores that littered the brick pavers with leaves as big as plates and called the bank to verify my safe deposit access hours. The attendant's voice was brisk and kind. "Until 10 o'clock, ma'am." I checked my watch. 9:10. Good enough. I drove with the calm of someone doing an errand, turned into the bank's lot, parked in the line of empty spaces, and went in. The vault door swung like a planet's gate. The box itself was small, harmless looking in the way a sleeping animal is harmless. Inside lay the titles, crisp and thin, smelling faintly of dust. The warranty deed assigning the house to my LLC. The car titles. The notarized letter under which Daniel could, with my blessing, refinance the house into his name within a year if he asked. He had not asked. I ran my finger down the names the way you do at a war memorial. Hale Properties, LLC. Lydia M. Hale, Managing Member. Daniel Hale, Occupant. Consent revocable. I closed the box and handed it back to the attendant with both hands, as if it might cry if I wasn't gentle. On the way to their house, I called the towing company. 2 pickups, I said. Both friendly. Both clean. No drama. I'll be there in 25 minutes. Ma'am, the driver said, we'll be waiting down the block like you asked. I called the locksmith next. Emergency change out, I said. The property manager will meet you. I have authorization on file. Yes, Mrs. Hale. We'll be there in 30. The neighborhood where I'd bought my son a start glowed like a catalog. Porch lights with glass panels. Steps swept clean. Pumpkins set out like orange punctuation. In the driveway sat the white SUV Kara loved posting about on her social media, our family car and Daniel's slate blue sedan. The windows of the house were dark. They were at the reception, tucked beneath chandeliers, laughing in the camera flash. I pulled to the curb and turned off my lights. The tow trucks coasted in behind me, quiet, as efficient as beetles. The driver stepped out, hats low, the way men look when they intend to do a job without being seen. I showed them the titles. They photographed them and nodded. Fobs in my hand, I unlocked each car, turned the wheel to neutral, watched them cinch and secure. No alarms. No neighbors. The locksmith's van nosed up the street next, and the technician hopped down already shrugging into his tool belt. You want your old keys repinned for a day, or you want new hardware? New, I said. Keep the old sets for me in a bag. He worked quickly, metal bright in his hands, screws in a tidy cup. The property manager, a young woman in clean boots, arrived with a clipboard and a dog-eared copy of the lease addendum on which my name looked back at me like a mirror. She handed me the envelope with the new keys. Then, with an awkward courage that made me like her, she raised her eyes. They treat you right, Mrs. Hale? She asked. They treat me like I'm decoration, I said. That ends tonight, she replied, and slid the signed change of locks receipt into my hand. If you think I smiled, you're right, but not the way you imagine. I smiled the way a safe clicks. I smiled like an end of chapter. When the last bolt was tested and the last taillight disappeared down the street with the cars on the rigs, I stood under the eaves and listened. There is a sound a house makes when you reclaim it. It is not loud. It is not a slam. It is a hush. It is the drop of a weight you've been carrying so long you forgot you had it. In the morning, the courier would deliver the notice to vacate politely. They'd have 30 days to collect their things, plenty of time to find an apartment while they figured out how to apologize. I wasn't evicting my son. I was evicting entitlement. If he came to me with eyes that looked like the boy I raised and a voice that remembered his own mother, we would make a plan. But he would not learn that a woman can be erased in her own family if I turned the other cheek to accommodate a color palette. I drove home. I slept well. I dreamed of standing in a field of rebar and stacked stone while my husband said, "There, Lydia, look what you built." At 10 the next morning, my phone woke on the nightstand with a fury of texts breaking over it like surf. From Daniel, "Mom, where are the cars?" From Kara, "Are you serious with this? What kind of stunt is this?" From an unknown number with a heart emoji, "This is Kara's mother. You have made a mistake. We will be seeking legal counsel." From the property manager's automated system, notice of lock change completed, 11:43 p.m. Tenant notified by courier, 8:04 a.m. Signature, D. Hale. From my granddaughter, Ellie, age 9, who had stolen her father's phone, "Grandma, did you take Daddy's car? Daddy is mad, but I think your cookies are the best." I put the phone face down and made coffee. I buttered toast and sat at my small table, sunlight on the laminate as if it had been polished by prayer. Then I did what bookkeepers do. I opened a binder. The one labeled Daniel and K, household. I flipped to a tab in the back where notes hid like insurance against storms. There was the page titled after. I had drafted it with Ruth on a day when the sky outside her window looked the color of pencil lead. After. If they are kind, explain calmly. Offer a timeline to refinance. Offer help with applications and 3 concrete steps. Do not bend the steps. If they are cruel, protect yourself. Speak only through counsel. Remember, you do not owe access to anyone who speaks to you with contempt. If he says he loves you, listen to what he does next. Not what he says. My phone rang. I answered on the second ring because I am not a coward and because I will always answer my son's call. Mom, Daniel said, breathless, like he'd run uphill. What have you done? I've enforced what was already true, I said. The house is mine. The cars are mine. You are my son. That part is not for sale. You can't do this. I can, I said. I did. I am not punishing you, Daniel. I am protecting myself. You stood in a room I paid for while your wife placed me by the kitchen door. There was a silence on the line so long I could hear the click of something in his chest. Then he said, small and mean, a tone I recognized as not his but borrowed from the woman he married, "You're making a fool of yourself." Everybody's talking. Good, I said. Let them learn the price of a chair. Do you know how this makes us look? I know how it makes me feel, I said. Your mother. I could hear voices behind him, feminine and sharp. One of them said, loud enough for the phone to catch it, "Tell her we'll sue." Another, the bride herself, said if she wanted nicer seating, she should have worn black. Then a third voice I did not expect, a man's, older, Kara's father, perhaps, murmured, "That house is hers?" Since when? Since always, I said into the phone. I'll email you copies. You should read what your mother signs. He hung up. He was always the one who fled. When he was 5, he hid when hurt. When he was 12, he slammed doors. Now, as a man, he leaves conversations like a boy leaves rooms. The first legal email arrived before I finished my coffee. It was from a firm with a name like a staircase, 3 partners and an order chosen to sound expensive. The subject line, urgent, unauthorized lockout. The body was a warm bath of threats. The attorney CC'd Kara's parents, as if I might be intimidated by stationery. I wrote back with a copy of the lease addendum, scanned the title documents, and attached the notices with more politeness than they deserved. I CC'd Ruth. I included a photograph of the kitchen door at the venue, peeling white paint, the swinging hinge, and the edge where the metal hits the wall. I did not add a caption. If you know, you know. 2 hours later, a different thread hit my inbox. Subject, request for discussion, family resolution. It was from Kara's father. He asked for a meeting at a coffee shop halfway between our houses. We would like to talk without attorneys, he wrote. Surely we can resolve this amicably. People like to talk amicably when they realize the paper isn't theirs. Ruth called as I was considering the invitation. If you go, she said, remember your 3 steps. Don't walk into a trap where character is currency and yours is the only one on sale. They think I'm fragile, I said. They think you are alone, she corrected. But you have those binders. You have your husband's voice. And you have the truth the title search would confirm in any county office in the state. I went. Of course I went. Not to soften. To see. You can learn as much from a person's apology as you can from their insult. Sometimes more. The coffee shop was bright with plants and young people who could not fathom the luxury of losing everything because someone misprinted your name on a seating chart. Kara's parents were already at a corner table, a porcelain teapot between them like a prop. Her mother wore navy. Her father wore that particular kind of helplessness men put on when they discover a woman they love has done something they don't quite condone but will not oppose. Lydia, her mother said, as if we were old friends. We're so sorry for the placement last night. It was an oversight. Was it? I asked. The voice I used surprised me. Not its tone calm, but its strength. I had forgotten I sounded like that when I wasn't trying to make myself small to fit. She pressed her lips together. We can't undo what's done. But surely it shouldn't affect the children's home. They have plans. Plans require paper, I said. May I ask a question? When you made the seating chart, where did you put me first? In the first row, she said too quickly. Her husband cleared his throat. We believed it would be less complicated if our side handled the primary family tables. Optics. Optics, I repeated. I'm very familiar with optics. They washed my son's face with them last night until he couldn't see me. Kara's father leaned forward. What do you want? People believe the person with the property wants money. They forget we might want dignity. I want Daniel to knock on my door, I said. Not call. Not text. Knock. I want him to stand in my kitchen, look me in the eye, and tell me what happened last night and whether he believes it was right. If he does, I want him to leave with his head held high and find a place he can afford without my help. If he does not, I want him to apologize. Not to beg. To apologize. Then we will make a plan to transfer what can be entrusted. Not before. Her mother's mouth tightened. You're making him choose between his wife and his mother. No, I said. I am asking him to choose who he is. She leaned back, arms folded, like a hinge that had decided not to swing. Her husband looked down into his tea. What about the cars? He asked softly. They were a loan, I said. Loans are returned. Her mother shook her head. You're petty, she said, as if she were identifying a stain on a dress. Over seats and plates? We invited you. You seated me by the kitchen door, I said, and even as I said it, I felt the words drop into the room like bricks. Do you know what they call that chair? They call it the chair of correction. It's where you put someone to teach them who they are to you. She flushed. That's ridiculous. It is, I agreed. Ridiculous that you believed I would learn anything sitting there but the shape of my own patience. I left them at the table, astonished birds with their beaks still open. Outside, the day was gray and lovely, a color my dress would have approved of. At 4 in the afternoon, I heard the knock I had requested. I had not planned what I would do with my hands when I opened the door. I imagine people who jump out of planes plan what to do with their hands. But I simply opened it. Daniel stood on my porch with no car behind him and a face that did not know what it was about to do. He looked like the boy who used to drag his backpack up these steps, the man who had carried my groceries when my knees first complained, the stranger who had passed me by the kitchen door without seeing me. He looked like all of them. Come in, I said. He did not hug me. I did not reach for him. I poured tea and set the cup before him like a chalice. He did not take it. He held his phone like a shield. I'm here, he said. What do you want me to say? Nothing I put in your mouth, I said. What do you want to say? He looked at the table, at the cup, and then, with excruciating slowness, he put his phone face down on the wood. He stared at his hands, rubbed his wedding band as if his finger itched beneath it. Kara, said the kitchen. He stopped. I didn't know until I saw you in there. And then I thought you wanted to sit there because it was quieter. Is that the story you're telling yourself? I asked. So you can keep your pride clean? He flinched. Maybe. Did you think it was kind? I asked. Never mind what you thought they wanted. Was it kind? He swallowed. No. Did you think to move a chair? I asked. Everything was, he broke off. No. Did you think to take my hand when you danced? I asked. I was. I forgot, he said. The shame in his voice hit me like the smell of varnish, sharp, cloying. I remembered him at 5, face pink with hot tears because he'd left his toy bear at kindergarten and decided he didn't deserve it anyway. He finally lifted the tea and drink. He set the cup down with care. I'm sorry, he said. He said it twice, like a man testing the solidity of a step before he puts his weight on it. I'm sorry, Mom. Do you know what for? I asked. Not unkindly. If he was going to say words, I wanted him to own them. For letting someone treat you like furniture, he said. He looked me in the eyes the way men do when they've learned the cost of not looking. For forgetting who you are. And who is that? I asked, because sometimes a woman needs to hear it spoken. You're my mother, he said. You built everything I stand on. I nodded. Good. Now we can begin. He looked at me like he had been waiting all day for a door to open and, finding it open, had forgotten what he was meant to do on the other side. Here is the plan, I said, and pulled a folder from the stack by the fridge. It has 3 steps. You will hate them because you will think steps 2 and 3 should be first, but they're not. They are second and third, and we will not skip. He smiled despite himself. This is very you. This is very me, I agreed. 1. You will tell your wife the seat she gave me cost her the keys to the house, and that only she can return them by apologizing to me without excuses. She will not apologize to get the property back. She will apologize because it is what you do when you are wrong. If she cannot do that, you two will plan for a move. I will not fund it. 2. You will meet with Ruth. She will explain the terms under which you may refinance the house into your own names after a period of 6 months, during which you will demonstrate respect, not perform it. 3. We will choose together how to transfer the cars, provided you can insure and maintain them yourselves. If you cannot, you will buy something you can afford and be proud of paying for it without my help." He breathed out, a sound like surrender and relief mixed in a cup. 6 months is a long time. So is 30 years of marriage, I said. So is the rest of your life. Tell me, Daniel, do you want to start yours with a lie? Or do you want to start it with a lesson? He laughed, then covered his mouth, startled by the sound. A lesson, I guess. He sobered. She won't like it. Then she can dislike it, I said. Her feelings are not handcuffs. He left an hour later, 2 copies of paper in his pocket, the ring of my old house keys in his palm. He looked back from the steps the way he used to when he'd brought home a report card he worried wouldn't please me. I gave him the same look I always gave then. Not disappointment, not indulgence. A look that said, "Go on. Be better." Night fell. I washed the 2 teacups and set them to dry. I was wiping the table when a car engine stopped outside with a sputter. A door shut too hard. Footsteps hit my walk like a metronome set to furious. The knock that followed was not a knock. It was a threat. I opened the door anyway. Kara stood there in a white coat like a warning flag. Her hair was perfect. Her expression was honed. Behind her, a rideshare idled with impatience. "You've embarrassed us," she said. "No greeting. No name." "You've taught me," I said, "to know where my chair is." "Give him the house." "No," I said. "Give him the cars." "No," I said. She leaned forward, perfume like a sugar orchard. "Do you know what people are saying right now?" she asked. "They're saying you sat your husband's mother by the kitchen door." She recoiled as if I'd slapped her, and for a moment I felt pity. Then she found the place she'd been told all her life would save her: indignation. "You're punishing him because you don't like me." "I am punishing no one," I said. "I am simply failing to subsidize your poor manners." Her jaw clicked. "We'll get lawyers." "I have one." "We'll say you're unstable." "I'm old," I said. "It is not the same thing." She threw up her hands, as if the air itself had offended her. "You don't want a daughter-in-law. You want a clone. A servant." "I want a woman who can share a table," I said. "And until you learn to set one, you will eat where you seat yourself." She turned as if to leave, then turned back, a thought slamming into her face with such force she couldn't keep it in. "You think you're teaching me a lesson," she said low. "But all you're doing is pushing him away." "He loves me." "I know," I said. "Does he love himself?" Her hand stilled on the hem of her coat. For the first time, uncertainty flickered. Not regret. Not yet. But the dawning knowledge that someone was speaking a sentence she didn't have a ready reply for. "Good night, Kara," I said, and closed the door with the gentleness you save for doors that belong to your own house. The latch clicked. The world settled. In the morning, I would wake to new emails, little knives wrapped in courtesy. I would wake to a voicemail from the photographer asking whether the remaining invoice would be paid by Daniel's card or mine, and I would reply with the card the bride's mother had promised in August. I would wake to a text from my granddaughter with a badly drawn heart and the word cookies spelled wrong. I would wake to the work of the next day of my long life. But that night, I stood in my kitchen, the real one, not the one for hiding mothers, and I set 2 plates side by side on the counter. I put bread on one. I left the other empty and waited. Some lessons you teach once. Some you lay out like a table and hope someone you love decides to sit. I washed my hands and dried them. I turned off the light. The house breathed. The binders waited, their spines lined like a horizon. Outside, the sycamores dropped their leaves one by one, covering the ground in a soft testimony to how things end when you are paying attention. And somewhere across town, in a rental car with too much perfume and not enough gas, a new wife stared at a set of locked doors and learned the word deed the way a person learns the taste of their own name. 3 days after the wedding, the bride's mother tried to evict me from my own house. She left with a trespass warning and a bill forwarded to her personal email. If that sounds impossible, wait until we get to the call she placed to Adult Protective Services. By then, I'd already sold the white SUV and turned the check into my granddaughter's college fund. The morning after Kara banged at my door in her white coat, the phones quieted. That's the way storms behave when they realize the window is shut. They circle, then they spend themselves on someone else's porch. I used the quiet the way a mason uses a level. I called Ruth, asked her to hold the 30-day notice in abeyance while Daniel met the first step. Then I pulled a labeled folder from the binders, vehicles, and laid out the path for the SUV. Let me be plain about something. I didn't sell it to hurt anyone. I sold it because I had left tools within reach of people who didn't know how to use them safely. The registered owner was me. The insurance, me. The repairs, me. The photos on Kara's social accounts calling it our family car were a feeling, not a title. Feelings don't pay the registration. Ruth's paralegal arranged the sale to a dealer that paid by cashier's check, and the funds moved into an account titled Hale Minor Education Trust. Beneficiary, Ellie. That name steadied me like a handrail. When the teller slid the receipt across the counter, I thought of Ellie's crooked teeth and the way she had learned to whistle this summer by standing on my back steps and trying until the birds answered. I sent a photograph of the receipt to no one. I just tucked it into the Ellie folder and closed the binder. At noon, there was a knock at my door too brisk to be neighborly. When I opened it, 2 police officers stood on the mat, hats in hand. Their faces wore the cautious politeness of men sent to fetch a story and hoping it would be short. Mrs. Hale, the taller one, asked. Yes. We received a call from a family member concerned about your welfare. A wellness check. Come in, I said, and stepped aside. If you meet every request with open doors, people have nowhere to hide their suspicions. They stood in my kitchen and admired my tidy counters the way men do when they have mothers who train them to notice neatness. I poured iced tea. The older of the 2 accepted. The younger shook his head and looked at my framed photograph of my husband with a kind face. May I see your identification, ma'am? I handed over my driver's license and, for sport, my library card. He smiled in the way men smile when they find what they are looking for while expecting a hunt. Your son's wife's mother, the tall one said carefully, reported that you might be confused and making decisions under duress. From whom? I asked. My own pen. He colored. We have to ask. Do you have access to your own finances? I pointed to the binders. Would you like a tour? I said, half kind, half challenge. They did not need a tour. They needed the feeling of a tour. I lifted one binder, opened to the tab with the vehicles, showed titles with my name, the signed bill of sale for the SUV, the trust receipt for Ellie. I did not show the house deed because I do not give away the candy at the door. The younger one nodded, relieved. It appears you're fine, ma'am. I am better than fine, I said. I am organized. The taller man cleared his throat. There is also a report regarding a lockout at your son's residence. Occupant, I corrected. And there is no lockout. There is a revocation of permission to occupy, delivered by courier this morning, which gives 30 days. If you like, I can show you the document. He liked. I showed him. He read. He tapped the paper with a fingertip, confirming that the ink was not a mirage. We'll note that this is a civil matter, he said, and his tone changed from official to human. Ma'am, I hope the family works this out. So do I said, and meant it. They left their card with the neat block letters of men who still believe paper can solve small things quickly. When the door closed, the house breathed again. I wrote 2 lines in a notebook I keep by the phone, the kind with a marbled cover, police wellness check, respectful. Showed titles. Resolved. Then I made a sandwich. Bureaucracy requires protein. I didn't have long to enjoy it. At 2, the property manager called to say there were 3 people at Daniel's house, Kara, her mother, and a florist with armfuls of flowers, filming on the porch. The manager's voice was admirably calm. We've asked them not to record due to the lease clause. They're insisting this is content, and that the public deserves the truth. What truth is that today? I asked. That you're an unwell parent hoarding assets, she said, reading from her notes. Also that the kitchen door was your choice because you're introverted. I was not angry. I was fascinated. People will reshape a chair to fit their story if it means they don't have to move. The manager continued, they're saying they're in the right and plan to reclaim the space, with flowers and a family dinner live stream tonight. You've done well, I said. Call the police. Tell them there is a known civil dispute, a no filming clause, and an owner's request that the porch not be used for performance. Ask for someone patient. You'll get the older one with the kind eyes. Tell him Mrs. Hale says hello. She laughed despite herself. You sound like you run a theater. I run a house, I said. They look similar if you squint. I drove over. Not to make a scene. To be present. When you let people build a legend without your silhouette in the frame, the story grows dangerous. They were exactly as described, Kara in a pale dress like an apology with no verbs, her mother in navy again with a face that could slice bread, the florist exhausted already by the need to fill space and soothe tempers. A ring light perched like a moon on the front step. The florist had arranged a garland around the doorbell, which no one had pressed, perhaps because no one wanted to risk being invited inside. Kara saw me and brightened the way a person does when they see something expensive. Perfect, she said to the phone. She's here. Turn it off, I said, not loudly. The ring light went dark. The florist exhaled. Kara's mother lifted her chin. We're here for a family talk, she said, loudly enough for the neighbors, who did not need encouragement. Family talks happen at tables, I said. You removed my chair. The older police officer arrived with his partner, none of us surprised to see each other so soon. His eyes swept the ring light, the flowers, the neighbors, me. Afternoon, Mrs. Hale. Officer, I said. He asked for everyone's names, collected them like shells, and then in a voice that made the street exhale, explained that filming on private property without the owner's consent was not happening today, and neither was entering the house. Civil matter, he said, the phrase of benediction that sends excitable people back to their cars. Kara's mother looked at me with cool dislike. This is not over, she announced, to the world, to her daughter, to the ring light that would remember her well. It is only beginning, I agreed, and that's the part that should interest you. They left with the flowers, which felt right. Sometimes the best arrangements are the ones you carry back to the van. The ring light wobbled down the walk like a ghost being coaxed home. That evening, the email arrived about the eviction of me from my house. Subject: formal demand to vacate, emergency grounds. I read it standing up. It claimed I had been abusive to my son. It claimed I was unfit. It claimed the house would be better placed in the hands of the next generation. The most interesting line was the one that revealed the motive without meaning to. Given the significant sums Mrs. Hale has recently moved, we are concerned about dissipation of assets. Translation: we thought that car was ours and the sale frightened us. I forwarded the email to Ruth with one line: shall we invite a judge to the kitchen door? She replied with a smile in ASCII and a request that I get a good night's sleep. Wear the dove gray dress if you feel like it, she wrote. Judges appreciate continuity. The hearing was set for the following week. Between then and now, life did not pause. I do not recommend litigating your dignity if you have errands, but sometimes groceries and honor become the same chore. Ellie came over Wednesday with a backpack full of math and a face that suggested worry had learned her address. Her mother dropped her at the curb, waved, and drove off in a car that smelled like crayons and apple slices. Ellie's sneakers squeaked on my kitchen tile. She stood on the stool at my counter and watched me crack eggs. Dad says you're making rules, she said. I am, I said. Rules help people be kind when they forget. She nodded gravely. My teacher has 3. One is use inside voices. You didn't use your inside voice at the wedding. Someone used it for me, I said. They put it by the kitchen door. She chewed that over like a carrot and then said, Dad cried in the car yesterday. I stirred batter until it shone. Good, I said. That means he found the part of himself that pays attention. Crying is what feeling looks like when it is serious. She accepted that and changed the subject, as children do when they sense the depth of a well and decide not to toss their pebble into it. We made pancakes for dinner. We made small talk about fractions and recess and a friend who tried to cartwheel and lost a shoe. When I walked her out to the curb, Daniel was waiting, shoulders sloped under a weight that looked like words. Can I talk? He asked. Yes, I said. For 5 minutes on the walkway. Ellie climbed into the back seat and buckled herself with the competence of small acrobats. She waved at me through the glass like a ship's sailor heading out for a short voyage. I told her, he said without preamble. Kara. I told her she has to apologize. And? I asked. She said apologizing is performative and she's not doing rituals for older people to feel big. Then she threw up in the sink and said she might be pregnant. There are words that alter rooms the second they are spoken. Pregnant is one. It makes ceilings higher and floors lower. It makes doors stick. What do you want? I asked. Both, he said, and then laughed a short laugh because he recognized the impossible geometry. I want to be a good husband and a good son and a good father and a good man. I want a house where no one gets sat by a door. Then build one, I said. Start with a chair. He nodded. She won't come tonight. She said she'll never come. He rubbed his forehead. Mom, if she is, we'll need the car. The car is already an education, I said gently. You'll need to learn how to build a budget without it. I hate that makes sense, he said. Sense often sounds like something we don't want when we're used to what we do, I said. Bring me your numbers tomorrow. We'll make a plan. He left with a look I had seen on men lifting heavy boxes, the grim satisfaction of having finally grasped the thing that was always going to be heavier than they hoped. The hearing arrived on a rain-slick morning that smelled like steel. I wore the dove gray dress and the pearls. Ruth met me on the courthouse steps with her briefcase and her hair pinned back like a declaration. Across the hall, Kara's mother stood with her attorneys like a queen among chess pieces. Kara herself did not attend. That told me everything. The judge was a woman with silvering hair and a face that had learned when to be stone. She listened. That is rarer than it sounds. She listened to their claims, elder vulnerability, sudden asset movements, a history of controlling behavior in which I had dared to ask for receipts. She listened to Ruth as she walked through the deeds, the titles, the dates, the notarizations, the perfectly timed way everything fit into the binder the way bricks fit into a wall. She listened to the police report that called this a civil matter. She listened to the property manager's statement about filming with ring lights on the porch. When it was my turn, Ruth touched my wrist. If you speak, she whispered, say only the small true thing. I stood. My knees didn't shake. My voice was not loud. They sat me by the kitchen door, I said. The property is mine. The respect is not. I came here to protect the first and to require the second. For a moment, nothing. Then the judge made a small note with a pen that clicked like a tiny gavel. Motion denied, she said. It was almost casual. To them, shocking. To me, a bell that struck exactly the hour it should. Outside, on the steps where strangers learn the shape of their futures, Kara's father approached. He had not spoken in court. He had looked at the floor a great deal. Now he looked at me. I'm sorry, he said, and the way he said it made the apology a thing with bones. Thank you, I said. He inhaled. She, my wife, she manages optics. She thinks that's the same thing as managing truth. His mouth twisted as if he'd bit a sour candy. It's not. I see that now. Truth manages itself, I said. We are the ones who trip. He glanced down at the umbrella in his hand like a man who suddenly notices the usefulness of objects he has carried for years. If you need anything, he said, and then stopped, because men like him are trained to offer help only when they can also offer control. He rephrased. If you ever want someone to carry a box, I can carry a box. Noted, I said, and we left it there, dignified and strange. There are two kinds of silence after a courtroom win. The first is peace. The second is the silence of the other side preparing a new angle. We received the second by dinner. The call came from a caseworker with a gentle voice. I'm following up on a report filed anonymously, she said, and I could hear the script in her sentences like lines in a play. It alleges that you're being coerced by your legal counsel to move money in ways that disadvantage your family. Is the anonymous reporter fond of navy dresses and mood boards? I asked. She coughed to hide a laugh she probably shouldn't have let out. Ma'am, I do need to come by. It will be quick. We like quick. Come, I said. Bring your clipboard. I have cookies. She came. She saw the binders. She ate 2 cookies and pocketed a third the way women do when they know they will need strength later and don't know where it will come from. She left with a file that contained exactly the number of pages she required to write no concerns at this time. Somewhere across town, a woman in navy clenched her jaw. It was late when Daniel texted. "Can I come?" I said yes. He showed up with a notebook and a pen borrowed from a bank. He had written at the top of a page, "Budget." Beneath it, for trembling columns, "Income, bills, groceries, gas." He looked at me with the anxiety of a boy who has brought the wrong instrument to band class. "We start where we are," I said, and sat beside him. We added and subtracted. We learned that numbers do not pity us, but they do tell the truth. We watched the lever of a life move a fraction towards solvency when he wrote cancel subscriptions we don't use in a square, and when he circled call insurance to adjust. At one point, he put his hand over his eyes and said, "It was always easy because you made it easy." "Then let it be hard," I said. "Hard makes men. Easy makes spectators." He nodded and wrote hard in the margin. I pretended not to see. When he left, he hugged me. It wasn't a goodbye hug. It was the kind you give when you have finally realized the person you are hugging is the same one who buckled your car seat when your feet didn't reach the floor. I stood on the porch a long time after the door shut. The sycamores had let go of half their leaves in the last hour. The air smelled like damp paper. It reminded me of the envelopes I would open the next morning, because that is what life does when you think you deserve a day off. It delivers mail. The email subject lines told a story. One from the photographer, as discussed, remaining invoice charged to card on file K, mother. One from the caterer, outstanding gratuity, who will handle. One from the venue, damage deposit to be refunded to card ending 4132. That was my card. I wrote back and asked the venue to donate the deposit to the staff tip pool if they could. They could. They did. Sometimes revenge doesn't look like a slam. Sometimes it looks like fairness with a point on it. By Friday, the online narrative had begun to gum up on itself. The live reclaiming dinner never happened. The ring light had wobbled away. The florist posted pictures of bouquets without tagging anyone. Even the neighbor who runs a hobby blog titled Our Little Street deleted her post about concern for the elder at number 18 after the caseworker's visit. People get bored. That's the truth no one puts on mood boards. Boredom is what saves you if you refuse to feed it. On Saturday, I found the courage to do the one thing that felt more dangerous than court. I called Kara. She answered on the second ring, suspicion sharp in her hello. "I'm calling," I said, "to invite you to dinner." Silence. Then laughter edged with disbelief. "You're joking." "I don't joke about forks," I said. Monday night. 6. No phones. "Why?" "Because you are family," I said, "and family either learns to eat at the same table or learns to leave the table without breaking it." She said nothing for a moment long enough for me to imagine the arguments scuttling across her brain like crabs. "Fine," she said finally. "I'll come." "I'll set a chair for you that is not near a door," I said, and hung up before she could turn the sentence into a battleground. I cooked as if a treaty depended on it. Roast chicken with lemon and thyme. Green beans snapped by hand, because my mother taught me that's how you remove the ache from your fingers at the end of a day. Mashed potatoes, heavy with butter, because I am still a Midwestern girl under this city calm. Rolls warmed. A pie that sounded humble and was not, apple with cheddar in the crust. Food is a language. It says, "I considered you before you arrived." At 5:58, there was a knock. Not the sharp one. Not the furious one. A knock like a question. When I opened, Kara stood there without her coat, without the navy shadow of her mother behind her, without a ring light. Her hair was pulled back. Her face was not honed. It was a face without scaffolding. I felt something in me unclench in surprise. She stepped inside and stopped, her eyes caught by the table set for 3 like a solved equation. She looked at the chairs, at the way none of them was near a door. She said, almost to herself, "This feels staged." "It is," I said. "Life is staged. The trick is to choose your props with care." She sat. She did not reach for her phone. She placed her napkin in her lap like a person capable of both self-control and appetite. For the first 10 minutes, we spoke as two women who might someday like each other if the world were arranged differently. Then we moved from weather to weathered. "I didn't put you by the kitchen door to hurt you," she said, and I believed that she believed it. "I did it because the photos, my mother," she said. She stopped. "She knows how to make things look good." She has talent, I said. She could make an empty field look like a festival. But a festival is not a home. Kara's fork hovered over her plate, then lowered. I wanted the day to be perfect, she whispered. Every picture. Every song. And you, she swallowed. You wear gray. You cry at the wrong moments. You bring the wrong casseroles. You ask for receipts. I also buy the house, I said. Tears burned her eyes so fast they seemed rehearsed, but what followed was not performance. It was a confession. I didn't grow up with enough, she said, words tumbling like marbles. Now when I have things, I cling. I get loud. I control. I think if I keep everything in a line, nothing will disappear. What disappeared? I asked. My father, she said. To work, not to death. Same feeling. We were quiet. Somewhere down the street a child learned to ride a bicycle, their father running behind, the usual choreography of wobbles and cheers. Kara stared at her plate. Your son, Daniel, he says he wants me to apologize. He says true things when he's not trying to keep everyone happy, I said. Do you? She looked up, and for a moment I saw the girl she'd been at 9, at 15, at 20, each with a backpack too heavy for the shoulders beneath it. I will, she said. But not to get the house. To get yourself back, I said. Good. She exhaled, and the table shifted back into focus. We ate. We made small jokes about potatoes. We discussed future pies like a plan. Then she told me the test had been negative. I felt both possible futures in the pharmacy parking lot, she said, refusing to be delicate. Neither was as terrible as I imagined. Neither was as perfect. Perfection is for photographs, I said. You don't have to live there. When she left, she hugged me. It wasn't a trophy hug or a hostage hug. It was what you give a woman who set an extra place for you when you expected to be scolded. At the curb, she turned and raised a hand. The gesture was small and enormous at the same time. I lifted mine back. We were not healed. We were not even whole. But we were both in the same picture, and no one had to stand by a swinging door. The next morning, the house needed sweeping. That's another thing no one tells you about revenge and reconciliation. The crumbs are the same afterward. I swept. I baked. I opened the Ellie folder and wrote a note she would read when she was 18, something about the day her grandmother turned a car into a semester, and how quickly a woman can learn the shape of her own spine if pushed up against a kitchen hinge. At noon, Daniel arrived with a cashier's check. He held it out the way men hold a child the first time, terrified, thrilled. First month, he said, and a deposit on an apartment we can afford. He added quickly, we still want the house. Someday. When we can do it without you. Not because you're mean, he rushed on, because we want to stand in it knowing we put the beams there ourselves. Good, I said. I'll hold it until then. Houses like to be kept by people with patience. He nodded. I told Kara that if she can't love you, she has to at least respect you, the way a person respects weather they can't change. I laughed. I am weather, I said. I accept. He frowned. She says she will apologize. She already did, I said. She ate chicken and told me the truth. His eyes watered. You too, without me? Some tables women sit alone, I said. Then we invite men to sit when it's safe to talk. He put the check on the counter, then, like a schoolboy, asked, Can I have a cookie? You may have two, I said. That afternoon, I attended to the quiet parts of victory. I called the bank where the safe deposit box lived and, for the first time since I'd placed them there, moved the car title for the sedan into a new folder labeled transfer later. I wrote Ruth a note with 3 sentences about what I wanted 6 months from now. A refinance, a title change, a lunch with pie where we laughed about the chair. I called the property manager and asked her to draft a new use of property addendum that allowed family dinners by invitation, restricted filming, and protected everyone's grace. She emailed it to me before sunset. It was a good sentence. The property is a home, not a stage. At dusk, I walked past the old house. I have walked past it 1,000 times since we bought it for Daniel. That night was the first time in months it looked like a house instead of a symbol. The porch light glowed. No ring light. A paper grocery bag sat by the door as if someone had run inside and forgotten it. In the yard, A child from down the block had left 3 chalk hearts and 1 lopsided hopscotch grid that didn't quite reach 10. It looked like a street again. Which is to say, it looked like a place where people live rather than pose. You want to know the strange part? The more I tightened my boundaries, the more my world softened. Neighbors waved longer. The mailman chatted. The librarian flagged a book I'd love. When you stop performing, the audience turns into friends or wanders off to find a different show. Either way, you get your living room back. On Sunday, the church bulletin announced a food drive. I baked. I passed Kara and her mother in the aisle by the canned tomatoes. The mother's mouth was tight. Kara's was not. "See you Thursday," she said. The mother blinked. "Thursday," she echoed, caught off guard by a plan she hadn't approved. Kara met my eyes. "Cooking lesson," she said to me and to her mother at Lydia's. If you think I didn't grin in the produce section like a woman who just found out her garden survived a winter, you don't know me at all. That night, I wrote the next page in my notebook. After week 1. Sold SUV. Opened LE fund. Wellness check, passed. Court, motion denied. Dinner with Kara, no phones, chicken, truth. Daniel, budget, apartment, check. New addendum, home, not stage. At the bottom I added, without irony, thank you. It felt right to write it without a name. Gratitude is not always addressed to a person. Sometimes it's addressed to the math of consequences. The following Thursday, I set out flour and eggs and a clean apron for a woman who has probably never had to dust sugar off her own sleeves. She arrived on time. She washed her hands without being asked. She did not bring her mother. She said, "Teach me biscuits," and I said, "I will teach you how not to overwork dough," and we both pretended those were different subjects. We cut the butter in with knives, then with our fingers. I told her how my husband taught me to build walls with mortar that was wet enough to mold and dry enough to hold. She told me how she used to arrange plastic cups into patterns at birthday parties when she was 9 so the photos would look like magazine pages. We were 2 women who had spent our lives staging reality so it would land softer. We were also 2 women who wanted, suddenly and urgently, to stop. The biscuits rose. We split them. We ate them standing at the counter like conspirators. When she finished the second one, Kara took a breath and said, not looking at me, "I'm sorry I sat you by the kitchen door." "I know," I said. "And I'm sorry I let you once." We washed the bowls. She dried. She set each thing in its place with reverence. At the door, she paused. "My mother thinks I've betrayed the brand," she said, making a face at the word as if it tasted like cold fat. "You have," I said. "You've picked a home instead." She nodded and left. You expect me to say that everything turned golden after that. You expect a parade of apologetic texts and a montage where everyone sets tables and laughs at the right parts. This is not a movie. It is a house. Houses creak. They shift in storms. They need maintenance. On Monday, a rumor bloomed that I had stolen the deposit the venue returned. On Wednesday, the bride's mother posted a beige square about elder respect. On Friday, Daniel forgot to bring receipts, and I had to pretend to be angrier than I was. But here is the midpoint truth I promised at the top. On the second Tuesday, the bride's mother came to my porch with a letter demanding I vacate my own home, and she left with a trespass warning. The officer with the kind eyes wrote it in his neat hand and asked her to read it aloud so she would understand it was real. She read the words in a voice trained to speak over other people's radios. Then she folded the paper and looked at me, the actual me, not the character she'd cast, and said, "You're not going to give up, are you?" "No," I said. "And you aren't either." She surprised me then. She smiled. Not kindly. Honestly. "We might get along someday," she said, and walked down my steps like a person leaving a stage after the last line, half sorry there is no encore. That night I made soup and thought about the word encore. It's French for again. We try to live our lives as if we will get a second chance at the song we sang badly. Sometimes we do. But more often we get a new song entirely, and we have to learn the notes while the band is already playing. When Daniel arrived that weekend with Ellie and a bag of apples, my house felt lighter than it had in months. We peeled and cored. We told ghost stories that were not about courts or kitchen doors. We made a pie. We sent half home with him so that his new apartment would smell like something other than boxes. Before they left, he stood in my hallway and read the framed list my husband wrote when we bought our first house. It has lived in every home since. 10 lines. The last one says, "In this place, we remember where we come from so we can choose where to go." Dad wrote that, he asked, his voice unsteady. "He wrote that for us," I said. "And for you." He touched the glass. "He'd like you right now," he said. "You're dangerous." "I'm careful," I said. He shook his head. "You're careful the way a blade is careful. Sharp enough to cut clean." "I prefer paper," I said, and we both laughed, relief disguised as humor. When they left, I packed a box for Goodwill, a box for the shelter, and one more for myself. Inside, I put the kitchen door place card from the wedding, the one that said Table 13 in a font designed to look expensive. I slid it under a ribbon and labeled the box, Lessons. I have learned the only things worth keeping are the ones that help you be kinder and clearer. The place card does both. We had reached the middle of the story, and the middle is where you decide if you're brave or tired. I chose brave. I chose, as ever, signatures over scenes. 6 months later, I handed them the keys right after the bride carried a chair across a ballroom, set it at the head table with both hands, and said into a microphone, "This belongs to Lydia. If you only came here for the ending, that's the picture you need. A woman who once hid me by a hinge, walking through light with a chair cradled like an apology." But I'm getting ahead of the lecture. The final months weren't dramatic. They were disciplined. That's what people forget about revenge with a happy ending. It looks suspiciously like routine. We started with a calendar and kept to it. After month 1, Daniel moved into an apartment he could afford. He texted me a photograph of a sagging couch labeled free and the line, character building. I wrote back, Lysol building. Kara came every Thursday. Biscuits became soup became roast chicken became, one memorable week, a cake that leaned like a question mark and tasted like confidence. I drew a line on a whiteboard called Respect Timeline and marked each day without a tantrum about the house. After 12 checks in a row, I bought myself a fern. After month 2, we replaced appearance with maintenance. Daniel learned to change oil. Kara learned to call the insurance company without crying. I learned to let the phone ring when the number was a cousin who only wanted updates to turn into anecdotes. The sedan stayed with me but lived mostly at the shop for a full service. If you're going to transfer something, make sure it's worth the weight of a signature. After month 3, a pipe burst at the house on a night so cold it sounded like glass thinking about breaking. The property manager called me. I called Daniel. He arrived in under 10 minutes carrying towels, tarps, and a look on his face that said I belong here because I am here to work. He shut the water, called the plumber, and texted updates like a man writing dispatches from a weather front. I showed up with a thermos and stood in the kitchen with him until the plumber said it was handled. He said, "We'll pay the bill," and I said, "You already are," and for the first time, he smiled at a problem instead of blaming it. After month 4, Kara's mother posted a paragraph online that could have been about a sick dog or a broken fence, but was definitely about me. I recognized it by the way it wore concern like a coat and doctrine like shoes. I didn't reply. Kara did. Sometimes love looks like keys held back until you can reach them. It was the first time she'd spoken publicly as a woman instead of a spokesperson. She deleted it 10 minutes later, but the 10 minutes mattered. Ellie and I started a Saturday ritual, a walk to the library, a cocoa, a math problem solved on a napkin. She drew a picture of the SUV turning into a stack of books and wrote, "Grandma's car equals school." After month 5, my wrist met the kitchen floor wrong. Sprain, not break. Kara arrived with a brace and a bag of groceries. She opened cabinets without asking where things were because she'd learned the kitchen by heart. "Sit," she said, and made soup exactly as I do, including the little dash of vinegar at the end that wakes everything up. "See," she said, not prideful, just relieved. "I can feed people too." Sometimes the lesson is simply, you can. Daniel went to his bank with an organized folder and a tie that didn't quite match his shirt. He came home with pre-approval numbers and a face that looked like a roof had just been set where there was sky. After month 6, We set a date. Not for a second wedding. For a dinner. No ring lights. No hashtags. No guest list beyond the people who cook and the people who eat. The refinance closed at 10:06 a.m. on a Tuesday that smelled like rain. Ruth slid the documents across the table. Daniel signed. Kara signed. I signed. My hand didn't shake. I kept the last page for my binder, a copy stamped with the courthouse seal that said, in grown-up letters, what I'd waited half a year to read, title transferred for value received and responsibilities accepted. At noon, we went to the DMV like ordinary people and transferred the sedan. Daniel handed over his proof of insurance like a boy presenting a science project that actually works. The clerk said, "Congratulations," and meant it. We bought a license plate frame on the way out that said paid for, not gifted. It was ugly. We kept it anyway. That brings us to the chair. Kara asked to book the same venue for what she called a make-right meal. Her mother objected on principle, which is to say she objected because she hadn't thought of it. But the venue liked the idea. The staff remembered table 13. The kitchen manager from the wedding sent me a note. "You were kind to me when I was new. Let me be kind to you now." I printed it and placed it in the binder under a tab labeled proof that people remember. We kept it simple. 3 tables. One for my family, one for her family, one for the staff we tipped with the deposit months ago. The only centerpiece was bread. I wore the dove gray dress. Kara wore a dark green that looked like a field after rain. Daniel wore the expression of a man who has finally discovered dignity weighs less than people warned him. When everyone had a plate and the room had found its quiet, Kara stood. My heart didn't pound. Surprise is for the first act. The last act is for confirmation. I made a mistake, she said. I cared more about pictures than people. I sat the mother of my husband by a kitchen door and learned that kitchens have doors because food needs to reach tables. Women need to reach them, too. I'm sorry, Lydia. She didn't cry. She didn't perform. She didn't turn to me like I was a camera. She simply crossed the room, lifted a chair from the corridor where staff pass, and carried it into the light. She set it at the head of the family table and kept her hands on the back for a breath, as if feeling the grain like braille. This belongs to Lydia, she said. And to anyone who's ever been told they look better out of frame. There it is. The sentence I had wanted and didn't know it. It wasn't just about me. It was about the women behind every swinging door in every room where people smile for photographs. Someone started clapping. I didn't see who. Maybe it was me. The sound rose like bread. The staff smiled. The kitchen door went on swinging because the world runs on both food and words. Kara's mother stood, and for a half-second I braced for a speech dressed up as a toast. Instead, she reached into her bag and took out an envelope. She walked it to me, no microphone, no flourish, and said, in a voice that had been sanded down by 6 months of friction, for what we should have covered the first time. It was a check. Not a punishment. A repayment. Behind it, a handwritten note. I was wrong about where to put you. I am learning table placement. P.S. Navy is not a virtue. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to cry. I did neither. I nodded and said, thank you, like a woman accepting a pie from a neighbor. Then I folded the letter into the pocket of my dress, where my husband's hands would have rested when he spun me around our first living room. Dinner was loud in the right places and soft in the others. The kitchen manager sent out extra rolls because he could. The DJ from the wedding was off doing another party. Instead, the venue piped in a playlist that included a song my husband loved. Daniel took my hand and led me to a small circle of cleared floor. He is not a great dancer. He never has been. He looked down at his shoes and then up at me and said, learn with me. I said, always, and we did the kind of slow shuffle that is really walking with a beat. At the end of the night, we didn't throw rice or blow bubbles. We stacked chairs. We wiped a spill. Ellie fell asleep with her head on a folded coat. Kara kissed my cheek and didn't make it a symbol. Then everyone went home to their homes. You might think that's the last page. It isn't. A story like this doesn't end with a flourish. It ends with administration. In the weeks after the dinner, we did the work behind the work. I closed the Hale Minor Education Trust to outside contributions and set up automatic deposits from my pension, small, steady, the way a garden drinks. I wrote a letter to Ellie for her 18th birthday explaining compound interest with a recipe for jam. She will understand both at once. Daniel and Kara set up a home maintenance fund that they actually used. When the dryer made a noise like a lost coin, they called a repairman instead of hoping it would stop. When a shelf sagged, they leveled it. When a bill looked wrong, they questioned it. Kara and I kept Thursdays. Cooking lessons turned into boundary lessons, turned into laughter that didn't need translation. She taught me how to arrange a table with candles that don't shed on the runner. I taught her that paper towels are fine. Ruth came over one afternoon to drink coffee at my kitchen table instead of her conference room. "You're the only client who puts tabs in her thank you notes," she said. I told her that when I die, she gets my label maker. She said the courts will tremble. Somewhere in there, I gave Daniel the framed list his father wrote for our first house. I had kept it by the door for years, a liturgy of 10 lines. We added an 11th together. The seat you offer your elders is the seat you hope your children offer you. We hung it in their entryway where you have to look at it on the way out. That's where guidance belongs, not over the couch, where it becomes decor, but by the door, where it becomes instruction. A month later, the bride's mother invited me to coffee. I went because curiosity has earned me more than fear ever did. She arrived without navy. She wore a sweater the color of unbleached flour. She looked like a person who had not slept well but had chosen to be awake anyway. "I don't expect friendship," she said, sitting ramrod straight, as if posture might protect her. "But I would like détente." "Détente is a fancy way of saying you won't throw knives while I'm in the kitchen," I said. She smiled, surprised it sounded so reasonable. She slid a notebook across the table. It was a planning book, of course. Inside, a list of changes she was making to her work. "No more editing people out of pictures," she said. "No more seating plans that hide the wrong faces." "Good," I said. "Add another line." She held her pen above the paper. "What?" "No mood boards that use the word palette when what you mean is people." She wrote it down, the way a student writes a line they suspect will be on a test. Then she did the bravest thing I saw her do all year. She told me a small true thing. "My mother," she said, almost whispering, believed that if you controlled the room, you controlled the life that happened inside it. She put my grandmother by the kitchen door at my parents' anniversary party. She looked up. "We inherit chairs." "We do," I agreed, and we moved them. We left that coffee not friends, not enemies, but citizens of the same table. It was enough. "If you're waiting for the coda, what happened to the house, the car, the family? Here it is, ledger style." House, refinanced into their names at a rate that made Daniel walk around the block to burn off gratitude he didn't know where to put. Deed filed. A copy in my binder. A matching copy in theirs. Sedan, transferred. Oil changed on schedule. Budget built with room for both repairs and sometimes flowers that aren't content, just actual flowers. SUV, gone, transformed into 3 words on Ellie's future, paid in full. Relationship, not symmetrical, not a fairy tale. Honest. Thursdays. Birthdays. A second attempt at a family photo where no one worried about colors and everyone worried about keeping their eyes open at the same time. In that photo, I'm not at the head of the table. I'm not by the kitchen door. I'm in the middle, where grandparents live when no one is calculating angles. Reputation. The neighbors moved on. The internet forgot. We remembered. That's all that matters. This is the part where a narrator would tell you what to learn. I won't. I'll just give you, as promised, the small true things that got me from a hinge to a head chair. 1. Paper is not cold. It is warm with the heat of every decision it protects. 2. A boundary is a kindness wearing spine. 3. If you teach people how to treat you, use a language that includes chairs. 4. Signatures beat scenes. Every time. 5. When you've been placed by a door, don't bang on it. Own the house. People like tidy endings. They like wedding bells and cutting ribbons and all the symbols that say we're finished. I prefer endings that look like beginnings with better lighting. On the first Sunday of spring, we held a small cookout in the backyard of the house that is no longer mine and always will be part of what I built. New grass underfoot. Old sycamores shaking out their hands. Friends, not audiences. Daniel flipped burgers with the seriousness of a man minding a grill and a mortgage. Kara brought a salad that was not on any mood board and tasted like something she'd wanted to eat, not perform. The bride's mother arrived with a cake she had baked herself. It leaned only a little. At some point, Ellie tugged my sleeve. "Grandma," she said, pointing to the patio, "where do you want to sit?" I looked. There were chairs everywhere, mismatched, inviting. I chose one far from the kitchen door because that's how habits form. Then, because we are allowed to be generous once we are no longer being erased, I picked up another chair and carried it to the center of the circle. "Here," I said, and set it down. "This one's for anyone who needs a seat." People cheered. Not loud. Enough. The grill hissed. The sycamores approved. And if a woman in gray with pearls smiled in a way that sounded like a safe clicking home, well, some sounds carry across rooms long after the music stops. That night, after everyone left and the grass remembered it was grass, I went home to my binders. I added one last tab, the chair. Inside it, a photograph from the do-over dinner. Kara's hands on wood. My son's face lifted. A room full of people who had put down their props and picked up their plates. I slid the page into place and closed the cover. The spine aligned. The house settled. Somewhere, behind some door, a hinge gently swung, and then, as all good hinges do, was forgotten, because the door it bore now opened to a room where we all had seats. If you've listened this far, tell me the name of your city and the chair you plan to move. I want to know how far a good seat can travel.
Your watch to the end. Be click here. You will hear another story from my grandma.